some kids went back like, it's so.
Oh, yeah.
It was, I mean, and the thing about it is, everybody was feeling it. You know, it was like, it just felt like people was getting ready to take a break and just shut down because it was just too much over.
Especially with the little babies.
Exactly.
And they don't even know how to be in a class.
No, they really don't. They really don't. So I don't know. It's and I still get both sides. But somebody that worked in that environment, they tried it, but it was just you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's both sides. It's really hard.
Right. But
Because see, like my office, I'm 3 people. Okay, 3 people are manageable. You can figure that out. But as you increase the number of people, you increase the variable.
right. Oh, it's almost time for me. Hey. It's okay.
Yeah, just my family. We tried to get together. It was so nice. The evening with Dina's mom and my daughter's pretty good. My oldest one, we have a baby.
Oh,
So we ended up leaving pretty early. It was in my yard. Yeah, we all had our own thing during the day. Then in the evening, we went over there and had a little bonfire.
Yep.
Yeah, it's past it. You guys ready? You ready now?
Because we never get to
He's
see
probably like,
people.
what's going on?
Okay.
What? With the baby?
Oh, yes. Yep.
Can I start, Doug?
Sorry.
Oh, the
Is
opportunity
is
to eat
the,
again.
what's that, the camera? Is that camera on? Okay, great. All right, welcome everybody to our work session. And I'll go into 2.01 with our president's report. Just to give you some dates of what's coming up. Next Thursday is our Board of Education business meeting. We'll be meeting here at 7 p.m. December 23rd is when winter break begins. And then on January 4th is when school resumes. And January 14th is when we'll have a business meeting. So I know that you guys are probably very upset that we will miss a work session in January. But we'll fit it all into the business meeting. All right. Does anybody have any other dates that we're missing on here?
Well, you don't have on there about the board sign up. Candidacy, that's not on here.
Oh yeah, December 15th
Yeah.
is when filing opens for the Board of Education. And that is at the admin building where you can go and file for that. And it closes on January 16th. Thank you. And I just want to make sure to state, it is closed during winter break because our offices are closed. Moving on to 2.02, we have our academic calendar committee with Dr. LaChance and Mr. Eady. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. We're here tonight to share the proposal from the calendar committee for the 2021-22 school year. Mr. Rob Eaton and myself. I want to just again reiterate the district equity statement because I do think that the calendar decisions are aligned to our goals with our equity statement. I should have brought my reading glasses. It would be a commitment to building positive, purposeful relationships with every student and every family member so that barriers to learning at high levels are removed. That's what we're aiming for with an academic calendar. Diversity among Ritenour families and staff is valued and sought and embraced. Student backgrounds, racial, ethnicity, religious, gender, class, and traumatic experiences do not limit teacher expectations on student outcomes. Resources are allocated so that every student gets what they need. And we see time as a critical resource. So we had lots of conversation, and Mr. Egan will speak to about as well, lots of conversation about time and time to help students perform better. Our district vision and mission also supported by our calendar. The academic calendar, just as a few reminders, we are, by House Bill 161 mandates school districts cannot start earlier than 14 calendar days prior to the first Monday in September. August 23rd, 2021 would be that date. It's the earliest day that we can start next school year, because Labor Day is Monday, the 6th of September. We worked hard as a committee to focus on developing a calendar that supported students and tried to keep students' best interests as the focus for the committee. We also worked to maintain at least a calendar of 1,044 student hours as mandated by state guidelines, and 181 teacher work days, which is part of our teacher agreement. So we solicited feedback through surveying Ritenour High School students. We developed many drafts of the calendar and discussed it as a committee to gain feedback, and also compared that to DESE guidance and law. We talked about those implications, or I did. I met with and spoke to district administration to make sure that those decisions we were making still supported the goals of professional development, assessment, student services, and curriculum implementation throughout the district. Again, I discussed the drafts with the activities and athletic director to make sure that we weren't somehow making decisions that was going to negatively impact our activities and athletic participation as well. We surveyed Ritenour High School staff again later during the committee, and then the committee also discussed that. We used input from the committee and really prepared the draft that we're discussing today. Committee this year was conducted over Zoom meetings, as you would expect, which did make it more challenging, just seeing every member on a box rather than being in a room together. Drafts were provided to the committee in advance, as well as surveys, so the committee did lots of work outside of the meeting as well, and also conveyed thoughts to me via email in between committee meetings. We gathered student input from the game changers, and then the game changers decided to also survey all 9th through 11th grade students, current 9th through 11th grade. We also used surveys to the committee to ensure, just in case someone during that Zoom meeting didn't get a chance to share their thoughts, they could do so through that survey. And then again, we surveyed the Ritenour High School staff regarding our final concern was what was going to be the end of the semester or first semester. We had a really strong showing of our parents this year. Lots of parent participation. This was the first time that I saw Mr. Zerbe outside of a screen, so it was good to see Mr. Zerbe earlier. So these are our representatives from the parents in the group, as well as the levels that their children represent throughout the district. And then the staff representation, and several of the staff members also have children that attend the school district as well. And I forgot to mention Dr. Singleton's children attending early childhood center, so technically she's representing parents as well in the decision making. Mr. Eaton, do you want to talk a little bit about some of our priorities that we discussed?
So we started out with, Dr. LaChance asked us what our top priorities were, what we were looking at. We So that kind of started us, and it was just a brainstorming. We talked back and forth on whether the year should begin on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Thursday. What would be the best option there? No school the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Professional development days throughout the year, looking at where we could fit those in to be most effective. Looking at being closed on the November election day, using that as a professional development day. One of the biggest priorities was keeping with a 2-week winter break. Also with aligning our spring break with at least special school district, trying to align it with some of the other districts around us, Pattonville, but at least with special school district. Looking at spring conferences, what was best on those days, what was best for our fall conferences on if we wanted September, October. And I have served on calendar committee for 4 years now. And I will tell you that we spent an entire hour having conversation on when semester ends, and Dr. LaChance kept trying to say, we're going to go to breakout session. Nope, one more thing. And no, we need to go to breakout. No, one more thing. And I mean, to say that we took very seriously as we sat here and tried to look at what was the best calendar, and listening to everybody and having probably some of the most thorough conversations I've ever had. Looking at keeping with no school on the Friday before Easter, and trying our best to have the year end before Memorial Day.
We've added that asterisk, as Mr. Eaton said, we had lots of conversation, and you'll see some conflicting information when I share the survey data, and we'll talk more about that in a few slides. Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Just wanted to show the board the consistencies that we maintained in the calendar. The 2021 calendar increased the length of student and teacher days by 10 minutes, just as a reminder, and then removed days from the calendar. You can see we maintained 171 days from, I have an astigmatism, so I'm not sure these are going to work out. We have 121 days. Maybe Julie does too. It does work, okay. 171 days, both this current year and last year, which equals the same amount of hours for students. The teacher workday was maintained at 181 days with the same amount of hours for them as well. And just as an asterisk, as a reminder, we removed 5 days from the beginning of this school year to help teachers prepare for virtual learning. Looking at changes over the last several years, just pointing out that we did reduce days from 2018 going to 2020-21. I want to point out that in 2019-20, it actually was 177 days, just like in 2018-19. Somewhere in my notes, I had recorded the wrong dates, and that looked odd, and I actually went back and looked at what the board voted on those years, and it was approved 177 days in 2019-20. So that was a typo on my part, as well as those teacher days. You can see that this year we did spend lots of time discussing an attempt to balance out the quarters. We wanted to try to do our best to balance the quarters of learning. So you can see the difference this year compared to last year with some of the decision making that we made. So this is the survey results we looked at and discussed. So Ritenour High School students, 187 students responded to the survey. 70% of them chose the December being the end of their semester. When I looked at their comments were, first of all, the 30% who said they wanted in January all said so because they wanted more time to study. They wanted more time to study. Some of the students who responded with December said they don't want to have to study. And they don't want to have to do work. They were concerned about teachers loading them down with work. That's what their concerns was over winter break. So we talked about that being discussion among the administrative team at the high school and teachers, as that time would be time for study review, potentially catching up on assignments, but not new assignments being given to students. We also discussed it at quite a lot of length with staff, and there were staff that were concerned that it was going to impact athletics. And I, again, confirmed with Drew Lonis that there would not be a negative impact to students with athletics, considering the 2-week grade checks, considering a window of time for participation before and after the end of the semester. And you'll notice initially, 60% of the committee also, and this survey was done on the 23rd, also was in favor of December. And then as that week, our final meeting where we were going to make that decision was on the 30th. As that week went on, you know, I wouldn't say every, but many of the committee members contacted me via email and said, I really feel like I need to change my vote. I've talked to teachers at the high school. I've talked to my children more at length, and I really feel like I need to change my vote. Can we really discuss this at the next meeting? I don't know, Mr. Eden, if you want to talk about that.
When we sat down, and as much as we thought, and there were many conversations of how important it was if we ended before winter break so they didn't have that 2 weeks to forget things. I mean, we were afraid that they were going to not study, forget, or they're going to be like my daughter is, where she's going to spend all of that time studying, and I'm going to be going, Brianna, put the computer down and have some fun. So we were afraid on both sides, but when we went back and we looked, and you were talking about a 10-day difference roughly to bring the semester to end before winter break and adding more days on the end, it was one of the scary thoughts was we were going to try to push so much stuff on those students in that first semester that it was going to be hard. And to keep it more balanced and more even, we decided we kind of had to go the other route. It was not an easy decision, I'll tell you that, because like I said, I've served for 4 years and I've never had that much conversation on a semester end. And there were, I don't think anybody ever really got mad at anybody, but there were some, there were some very opinionated conversations. And, but just again, as Stacy said earlier, we try to put every student first all the time. And when we looked at the students, this made more sense than going with a December.
The conversation really led to what can we do to try to ensure more success for our students. And if giving them more time to study and then even have time set aside for review after they return, if those are the review days, our hope was that could impact the students in a greater extent.
And then for those that didn't, that the teacher could have that conversation before break and say, hey, you know, you're missing this, and give them that little bit of an opportunity to get caught up, we thought was an added benefit by making that change.
So we understand the effects of the high school. Does it make any effect on the middle school or the elementary?
No, really, their year and their quarters, they're somewhat more flexible with that. There was conversation between elementary and middle, and there were, there were some challenging back and forth between the groups in some ways. And it was interesting to see.
So I sat in one of the breakouts with Dr. Singleton, and from elementary wise, she goes, it really doesn't affect us. We're year-long everything anyway. So elementary, it wasn't. I did reach out, didn't share too much information, so I promise I didn't break any confidentiality, but I did talk with some of the middle school principals and just said, does a semester break affect what you guys are doing? They all said, ideally it would be nice to come back to that clean break, but it really didn't affect grades. It didn't affect anything on their end. So it really only affected the high school students.
Okay. Thank you.
Ultimately, the committee on Monday decided to maintain the end of first semester and finals in January to provide more time for study and catch up on assignments for Ritenour High School students. That's what the conversation led to. We also talked about we were making a decision too quickly, so people were adamant that we needed to go back to the way it was, which was a semester break before winter break. But we had conversation that really that's too soon. We haven't experienced it yet. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We know the factors are being change due to the pandemic, and we wanted to experience it and try to do it well and gather some data then, and we could make a more informed decision in future calendar committee meetings.
It wasn't just future calendar. At one point, the conversation was, could we ask the board to give us to January on this calendar to come to look at how things fell this year? But ultimately we decided this year there was the pandemic effect in there. There was too many other playing factors that were going to not compare apples to apples,
So our recommendations are to begin the school year on Wednesday, August 25th. And I've given you each a paper copy to look at as well. So we were able to start the year on a Wednesday, which we felt helped our students acclimate back to school and our staff. Fall conferences during the first week in October, and we had quite a bit of conversation about that as well. Moving from September to October and starting later made sense to have conferences later. Professional Development Day on November 2nd. And we thought that would be a good time to just keep that consistent in November on that election day. So parents would know it, count on it, and so would staff if that's a possibility in future calendars. And then winter break next year would be December 22nd through January 4th. Teachers return on the 3rd, students on the 4th, and then maintain the end of the semester and final exams in January, which would be the 13th and 14th, which are that Thursday and Friday before the 3-day weekend. And then again, revisit the issue in following years. It was something that we committed to. Third quarter Professional Development Day in February. So we were sticking to our goals of spreading out those professional development days. Spring break, March 14th through the 16th. Oh, sorry, those are spring conferences, March 14th to the 16th and then the 18th. Spring break, the week of March 21st through the 25th. And aligning to special school district, there were parents that reminded us all that there are some parents that have students in special school district system and in ours, and at special school district schools, and it'd be nice to have their children have the same spring break. Also, we have tech school students here at the high school who they're expected to go to tech school when they're on spring break here. And that impacts their attendance at the tech school when they're on spring break here. So aligning those, we believe, would be beneficial to the students and the families. April Professional Development Day on April 15th. High school finals on the 25th and 26th of May, and then the last day for students on the 26th and last day for teachers on the 27th. Just want to point out an asterisk, and you'll see on the calendar copy that I gave you, I added a line that really establishes some discretion from the board, because right now, the way that the AMI guidelines are, it really limits the district to using 36 hours of AMI time, or approximately 6 days. For our days are longer than that, but they're thinking approximately 6 days of AMI time. So I wanted to give the board, and Dr. Kilbride and I talked about this, you would have flexibility if for some reason an AMI day did not work out, if for whatever reason, technology issues or otherwise, or we had a year where we had 8 or 9 days, obviously the board would have the discretion to have a meeting and discuss what are the options for the calendar. Do we add more days in May? What do we do with that time? So that is there as well. And the other consideration is we've started meetings already to talk about summer school 2021. We know it needs to be different. We know we have students that will need more time to catch up. So those conversations are already starting as well. Open to any other questions and comments. And I want to thank Mr. Eaton for his leadership throughout the whole committee meeting and then joining to them.
I got that. On the one slide, you talk about days, or like sometimes you're saying days, sometimes you're saying hours. And when I divide out the hours by days, sometimes it's 6 hours and 10 minutes. Is that correct?
So it should be, so when we look at our days, what we're doing is calculating, I need to think about this, the student hours are 6.5 4-1, so that's 6 hours and 40 minutes, I believe, technically.
Well, I just took the 1,044.
Oh, the 1,044. So we actually go longer than 1,044.
We go 1,097. 1,044 is the minimum, state minimum. We go
Okay, so
1,000.
ours is what?
We go 1,097.
Okay, that's not in the thing, so,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I noticed that on your committee, not all schools have representation. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I was strictly going by the number of staff that are listed in the policy. There's a limitation on the number of elementary staff, secondary staff, so I was really going by that. And then I asked, really asked teacher leaders and asked principals if, for those who are interested, and I went with that. We have some members that have been on the committee for quite a while, and we also tried to add some new members too.
I understand this spring break thing, my question, and this winds up being the same, falling the same way we've always done it, which I know you don't like to hear that. We, back when my kids were in school, we asked that we change to the last full week of March so that parents could always plan for that. And that does coincide for this year, so
Good.
that's okay. But I understand now what you're saying about that. And then I think there's a mistake on what you gave me, because according to the slides, you said that the students come back on the 4th of January and the teachers come back on the 3rd, but on this thing you gave us for January, it starts on the 5th.
So this is correct. The slide is wrong.
The slide is wrong.
Yes, I apologize. Because we were sticking with the
Okay.
routine of starting on a Wednesday.
Okay. That's good.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I will fix that for next week.
Yeah. I will say too that, I already told you this, but back in the day when I went to school here, we did have the exams in January. And the time when we came back from winter break was a lot of review time. I agree that we should try it again and see, especially since this year it's going to be like that, and we should see. I would think that the results will give us a better idea as to which is better. But yeah, using this year isn't really the best, but I think I agree that it's probably a good time to try it again. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. I apologize for
Been there, done that.
No, thank you for your hard work. I do have a question though, because I know that it's constantly asked of me. So does this mean that we will still have snow days for this calendar, or now it's all virtual days?
So Dr. LaChance talked a little bit about that. So AMI days are virtual snow days. And so as long as we don't go beyond 6, we would be moving away from weather days, inclement weather days, to virtual learning days. And so that was in the communication that went out to staff in the community right before our break last week. We'll do everything we can to give 24 hours advance notice to staff and families if we're going to shift to a AMI day or a full virtual day. Initially, the thinking was that it would just be a asynchronous virtual day, meaning there be set, learning activities that are planned in advance. But what we've seen in virtual instruction is that synchronous virtual learning is certainly superior. It's better than asynchronous. And so we think that if we can stick to 24 hours, as long as students have their device at home, which with your support, we're now a 1-to-1 district. Students can have their devices with them at all times. And as long as staff knows that the expectation is they're bringing their devices and their materials back and forth, if we give 24 hours advance notice, we could just shift into a synchronous live virtual day. We still need to continue to have conversations as a team. And I'm meeting with Craig Larson next week to talk about flexibility around those 36 hours. That does not have a statutory basis anywhere that I'm aware of. It's just a decision that was made by DESE around the 36 hours. So hopefully we don't have more than 6 inclement weather days but just trying to have more flexibility so that we could use as many AMI days as necessary.
I have a couple, go ahead.
No, thank you.
I've got a couple thoughts on that. One, it's been in the media that, hey, kids, you don't get snow days anymore. And, all kids look forward to those days, but so do the teachers. We have to be realistic. The teachers look forward to those days too. And the other thing is about having their devices at home. I can tell you from my own work experience, when my place of employment implemented that, people who didn't want to work said, oh, I didn't take my computer home, so I couldn't work. So, just something to think about.
That's good feedback. And I think, certainly there's going to be no better, do better with this.
Yeah.
The thinking of the team was that if we can provide 24 hours advance notice for it, hopefully we could address a lot of those issues that'll bubble up. But yeah, that's good feedback.
I think there's been one district that announced that we're not taking away their snow days.
Yeah, I did hear that too. Thanks, guys.
No questions. I appreciate the thought process surrounding the priorities, in particular the spring break timeframe, because I know that that is a conflict for a lot of families that have students at North Tech. So I appreciate the work.
Thank you.
I've never heard of that before.
So board members, this will be a recommendation that will be coming to you for your consideration and approval next week.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
I think you stay there.
Yes, this week.
Okay. So Dr. LaChance is going to go over the talent acquisition and employee demographic report with us.
Hey, again, I'm here to present the talent acquisition and employee demographic report for the current school year 2020-2021. Aligning to our equity statement, a commitment to building positive, purposeful relationships with every student and every family so that barriers to learning at high levels are removed. We know that that is primarily done by our teaching staff. So our efforts to recruit and retain the best teachers we can is a pivotal priority for the district. Diversity among Ritenour families and staff is valued, sought, and embraced. So seeking staff members that represent the diversity of our students is also of highest priority. And this does align with our vision and our mission. Objectives for the Human Resources Department is to ensure learning occurs in a supportive environment that enables every student to think critically, solve problems, and develop knowledge and skills necessary for success in our diverse global society, to ensure that all students are served by staff that are 100% highly qualified, which means they are certified to teach the content that they are teaching at the grade level that they are teaching, and to implement a recruitment strategy that attracts staff who reflect the demographics of our student population. Tonight, I plan to provide a general overview of the district's talent acquisition for the current school year and a summary of the employee demographics. So for 2021 school year, we onboarded 56 teachers, 1 administrator, and 8 support staff members. Certificated staff, as you can see, primarily continues to be represented by the elementary level, where we have the most teachers that we add. But also interestingly, the master's level was the level that we hired most of our teachers at this year. You can see we also pull from a variety of university experiences. In some cases, other parts of the nation, majority are represented by local in Missouri or Illinois schools, but we are pulling from other places as well, bringing in ideally diversity of thought to our profession in the district. Years of experience, Majority of teachers were in the first 4 years or had less than 4 years of experience. And again, we do tend to have a good mix of teachers coming to us with many years of experience. And as you can see, a large pool that this is their first year of teaching experience. Looking at the demographic comparisons by salary plan, you can see that overall, the percentage of people of color was of 18%. And that was the same for the teachers that we've hired. 18% of the teacher pool that we hired were teachers of color, trying to get more diversity and more teachers of color into the district to better serve and represent demographics of our students. We also know from research that the students of color aren't the only students who benefit from that diversity. The white students also benefit from that diversity of having teachers of color. Looking at each building and the representation of the student population compared to the teacher population, I'll point out that the School for Early Childhood Education has really the greatest diversity, but they also have the smallest staff. So 43% of their staff are African American, but they also have a small, relatively small staff. Booter Elementary has the lowest percentage of teachers who are non-white or teachers of color. And in conversation with Dr. Singleton, she has had several staff members of color who have left Booter for other opportunities in recent years, and even administrative opportunities in other districts. So that's an area that she and I have spoken about and continue to think of strategies to address that at Booter Elementary. The demographics for Iowan and Pratt. Marion demographics are very consistent with the district demographics for the staff. Marvin Elementary. Wyland Elementary. As you know, as a district, we have a growing population of Hispanic families and students, so we also seek to add diversity of staff who are Hispanic as well. Page and Ritenour Middle. You can see Ritenour Middle's teachers of color are below the district average, which is almost 16% for the district average. High school average is somewhat above that for demographics, but again, you can see it. No building does our teaching staff match our student demographics. And here's the breakdown comparison of teaching staff by level. Here's the 3-year teacher ethnicity rate. And you can see over the past 3 years, we've had a decline by about a little more than 1.5% of our teachers of color compared to the white teaching staff. So the diversity has not increased, but has decreased in the last 3 years. And then comparing recruitment to retention, although we recruited 18% of our teaching staff were increasing diversity in terms of teachers of color, but we were not, our retention numbers were also continuing to decline, which leads again to a district average of about 15, a little more than 15 or almost 16% of our teaching staff are teachers of color. And you can see that although the recruitment varies year to year, our retention has slowly declined for multiple factors. So when we look at the separations of the district, not by retirement, just the teachers who have chosen to leave the district, and the total number is at the bottom, you can see that the percentage, as long as the teacher of color percentage is higher than the current percentage, then we're essentially losing ground with our goals to increase diversity of our teaching staff in the district. So if our current percentage of teachers of color is about 16%, if we continue to have a higher percentage than 16% of the total group of teachers that are leaving us, then that's an indicator that we are losing ground in our goals to retain and then increase the diversity of our staff. So one way, I guess I'm saying one way of tracking it is look closely at the staff we have, but we also have to look at what are the demographics of the staff who are leaving us, and then start to dig in, why are they leaving us?
Right, but more are leaving in the white category than teachers of color, so.
Right, but in the white category,
Hiring teachers of color. We're not hiring teachers of color to fill these white positions better.
in some cases that is the case, but when we look at the overall, if the overall percentage of our teachers are, say, 82% white, then we have a group of teachers that leave us. If we're going to have a status quo, then about 82% of them would be white. But if the percentage of the teachers leaving us is lower than that 82%, that means a higher percentage of teachers of color are leaving us compared to the white teachers, which just causes us to look closer at the data. And again, we're not talking about large numbers of teachers either. We're talking about 30, 35 teachers a year. So it's not a massive number. It should be an area that we can address. When we look at Ritenour compared to the state, we're much more diverse in our teacher population than the state is. The state has almost 7% teachers of color. But when you look at the United States, it's at 21%. And there are many factors, and I put a link to that data in the slideshow if you wanted to look closer at that data. So there's many factors impacting that data, including research that shows that actually fewer people of color are choosing education as a career. And other professions of college graduated professions, they are becoming more diverse at a faster rate than the education field. So that's why we also talk about an effort to really grow our own teachers and really talk to students about the value of teaching and the benefits of teaching. When we look at district-wide by staff, by ethnicity, this includes support staff also. You can see that we're at about 72% and 28%. And then I don't know why that, so I don't know why that on the slide is showing. On mine, it's basically the male, female, and on the screen it's not showing that, but that is very consistent with national data, that about 24% of the nation's teachers are male, and about 76% are female. Yeah, it is showing correctly?
Yes.
Okay, on this screen in front of me, it's not. Okay. I wanted to talk about retention efforts first before recruitment. So it's important that we do focus on recruitment, but we also need to talk about efforts for retention. We know that quality professional development is key to keeping our teachers so they feel like they're growing each year and they're improving as a professional. So that is definitely part of our conversation. Ms. Gillian and I have regular conversations about professional development. So we have and have had district equity sessions for a number of years now with an informal invitation to buildings for participation. This year we moved to, okay, we have been doing this as an informal invitation. Now the expectation is to participate and to have an effort in each one of your buildings. So we're trying to build the capacity of the staff at each building over the last several years. And now we've shifted to, you need to have, it's an expectation to have an effort in each building. So trying to put action to really our equity statement. Develop cultural competencies for explicit expectations. So we're working through with a committee to develop what would be the cultural competencies in Ritenour, and then having that as part of the expectations to be identified in our evaluation tools, both for support staff and for teachers, so that we can measure progress as an organization and help us identify additional areas of professional development as we go. Again, trying to put actions to our equity statement. And really, a lot of this fits with research and some of the survey data from our teachers of color that say, oftentimes the reason people choose to leave is if they feel isolated, not valued, they feel like their perspectives are not valued and they're not included. Again, I mentioned the evaluation tools. We also know that leadership development is important. Dr. Kilbride has had over several years leadership development groups for teachers. That is essential. Teachers will sometimes leave us if they don't feel like there's opportunity for growth in their career. And then staying connected with the Ritenour Teachers of Color group. They're meeting monthly, and it's their meetings and their agendas, and they invite us to their meetings and give us an opportunity to talk with them and listen to them. But also they have ideas for supporting new teachers of color through mentorship and supporting our students who are interested in education through mentorship, through inviting them to their classrooms to help out in their classrooms. Also, they volunteer to work to assist in some of our recruitment fairs and our job fairs. So we typically would send a building administrator. They're all virtual this year. And we're looking at adding members from this group along with the administrator. We want to explore annual stipends for bilingual teachers. We know that we need to recruit more bilingual teachers in the district, and we need to find better ways of doing that and incentivizing people who really will have some skills to help us reach and teach our students and families better. And then again, maintaining competitive salaries and benefits. Related to retention and recruitment, I want to point out that for several years, Ritenour has had these goals and have been working towards these goals. Really, far back as Jack Williams, as Wendy Jackson reminded me, it's gone back for a decade or more. But in the HR circles and conversations, there are districts in our area that are just now talking about this. And that based on the recent things that have happened in society, they are taking note and they are also taking action. So the pool of teachers to retain and to recruit hasn't gotten bigger, but now the group of people interested in recruiting them has gotten bigger. So it's going to be more districts competing for a more diverse staff, which is a good thing overall, but it's going to make it more challenging moving forward if we don't start to encourage more kids to consider education. So recruitment efforts, again, continually looking at our recruitment and hiring practices regarding conscious and unconscious bias, ensuring that teachers of color are represented on interview panels. But we need to go a little bit further than that and look at diverse parents and students represented on those interview panels as well. Sometimes as educators, when we get in a group, we'll have what is considered group think. So everybody's thinking the same way, and just adding to that diversity of that panel will help. And then expanding our relationships with colleges and universities with diverse, high-quality teacher education programs. This year, this has been a bit of a challenge because everything has gone virtual. And some of their timing is not, so far, I haven't seen a schedule of here are all of our recruitment fairs for the year. We'll get a notice a week in advance. Next Tuesday is our recruitment fair. Can you join us? And we often need more lead time than that to schedule a day and get going on it. And then again, we're seeking out those recruitment fairs that are specifically, we know are a higher likelihood that we'll have teachers of color and bilingual teachers in those places as well. And I mentioned the Grow Your Own teacher program that Dr. Clausen is helping to lead here at the high school. I'm open to any questions or comments you may have.
I noticed that we don't have the statistics for the international International Welcome Center out here?
You know, I do not.
Because there we have a lot of diversity.
You're right. And I could add that into future. I just added what was done in previous years and I stuck with that. And they're pulled into the high school data and the middle school data. But I could.
As a separate site. So the question about the International Welcome Center, we could share that information as a separate site on Friday night.
Sure.
But actually the diversity of the staff at the International Welcome Center is actually pretty consistent with where our other buildings are. There's diversity in terms of some staff members have multiple languages, but a number of the staff members at the IWC, they speak only English. And so that was where Mike had shared, we are starting to have conversations around, value on, is it time to consider stipends for staff members who are bilingual to reach our Spanish speaking students as well.
Because we have like almost 0 Hispanic. In our area going on.
Right.
Right.
You know.
We consider the work that is often asked of them to help connect with parents, help connect with students, evenings, weekends. They're often putting in a lot of time and a lot of effort to reach our kids and parents.
Mike, those peers, grow your own, but they have a lot of people there.
Yeah, absolutely. So board members, there's been a lot of progress made on the grow your own effort with St. Louis University. In fact, we've got our next meeting of that group tomorrow. And I'm talking with Gary Ritter. So Gary Ritter is the Dean of the College of Education at SLU. And so Dr. Ritter is going to be presenting to the Pride and Promise Foundation in the near future along with us. And then we'll have Dr. Ritter in either March or April to present to the Board of Education. So far, there's been a verbal commitment to meet full financial need for up to 10 Ritenour students per year to get them in this pipeline program at St. Louis University. And some exciting conversation with 4 staff members in their admissions department around having a joint appointment. So there's a Ritenour staff member. It's very similar to the Columbia Public Schools model, which is really the model that we've used in proposing this to St. Louis University. It's a joint appointment between Ritenour and SLU. Somebody would have an office at the St. Louis University College of Education. We've also got an additional connection there in that Natalie Gerke is pursuing her PhD, and she's the graduate assistant for the Educational Leadership Department at St. Louis University and is in the office as well. So Patricia Clausen has been tabbed to lead the effort. She's doing great work. She's got a subcommittee of 5 Ritenour teachers. That includes Beth Davey. There's already been a recruitment session that involved 6 Ritenour High School students. And so I look forward to having Patricia, her committee, and then Gary Ritter come and present to you in April about the progress on this Grow Your Own pipeline, which has the potential to be very, very exciting. And I'd like to, Mike, if you would go back to the run graph on the recruitment retention of teachers of color. It's about in the middle, right there, one right there. So one of I just want to give voice to this data around 2015-16 into 2016-2017. You see a real sharp decline in the retention. So if you remember, that was the year where we lost some extremely high quality leaders of color that moved on to other leadership positions in other districts. So just as we need to improve not only our recruitment and retention, we also have to realize that we've got very high quality candidates of color, educators that are working in Ritenour right now, and people know who those people are. And so that makes the work even more urgent because we realize that there might not be opportunities at the moment for people who are ready for the next step in their leadership career, whether that be the superintendency, whether that be the assistant superintendency, or whether that be like last year, we ended up losing 2 high quality teachers of color to assistant principalships in a neighboring district. So just as we have to up our game, the urgency is there also because people in other districts also know the quality of Ritenour people. And I think there's that idea that people have to grow through you. And I believe that we never want to stand in the way of somebody who has an opportunity before them. but there's just a lot of pain that comes with that when you have good people that leave your organization.
I have heard the same thing that teacher told me that when they went to a workshop with other district people and they're, oh, Ritenour, they teacher Ritenour, yeah, we want them, so.
And so it makes our work to connect and retain all the more important, and we have to do a better job.
Dr. Chen, you mentioned that the efforts is surrounding the equity sessions and the bias training that's been more, I can't think of my word tonight. It's not,
Emphasize more.
no, it's not that it's.
Informal or
Yes,
voluntary?
thank you. I haven't eaten dinner, sorry. It's, historically, we've kind of done it from an informal format, but this year we're being more direct in that. How has that been received, and what type of feedback are we hearing from our administrators regarding that format?
I would say that the feedback that I've heard, and probably Evelyn could share more related to the organization because it's a professional development session, but we talked about the feedback we hear that people are ready, that people are open. But we also hear of, so those are the positive feedbacks that we hear, that people are ready for it, people are open. We also hear about the impact of the pandemic, where this is hard to do on a Zoom, that people sometimes feel and interpret the way somebody may be looking on a screen, or if somebody turns off their screen, or someone doesn't seem to be paying attention on their screen. And in some cases, some like microaggressions that are said in small breakout sessions, and people, and I think that I know that I've witnessed this and have felt this in groups as well at times, that I think we lose something in Zoom when you're not in a room with someone and you're not reading body language and can't always see their expressions. And there have been some hurt feelings at times, and people feeling offended where we've had to have repair sessions and talk about things. So that has happened too. I will say that the bigger conversation has been the pandemic, unfortunately, and we need to get back to conversation that's pandemic and all the other, and we're doing that, but I think that the virtual is having an impact, and not always a positive way for that.
Okay. I was just curious how that progress was going.
So we've received some feedback in some of the conversations from some teachers of color that they don't feel safe, do not yet feel safe in the space to have these conversations. We've heard that twice. I've heard that twice. And so that then creates more conversations around, what, we're doing the right work. What about, what steps do we need to take so that people can feel safe in the conversation, that a person doesn't feel like she has to speak for a whole group of people, or that, it goes a number of different directions. So I've been in that conversation twice this far. And I just appreciate the fact that both of those people were willing to come forth and share what they were experiencing.
Given points to identifying other places where that has happened as well. So it became somewhat of an aha that, the feedback we got is it's happening in those sessions. It's also happening in PLC meetings and grade level meetings and other meetings. So it's really like surfacing some other, some additional efforts that need to be had.
Yeah, I think when you teach, when they become more aware. I was with a teacher today, who you probably know, and she was reading an article in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and it was quoting what somebody said, and she immediately picked up, well, obviously you don't understand because you're grouping all these people together. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. So it's a lot of, I think it's really being able to identify these barriers, and being able to point them out. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear, though, that people are at least voicing, like, we're noticing this in other, I feel this way in other places too. So I'm glad to hear that type of conversation is at least coming out, because we are increasing that awareness. And it's a matter of kind of stepping into these courageous, uncomfortable conversations. And if you also create the environment where somebody does feel comfortable enough to say, ooh, that was an ouch. And then we're taking that time to go back and do that with Karen. So I'm glad to hear that that's happening. The other question I had was surrounding gender, just kind of helping us to think outside of that box as well. I see we have as just male, female. Where are we at with our conversations if I don't identify as either one?
It's interesting because Hassan and I had that same conversation about this presentation. That is this presentation in itself outdated and reaffirming old thinking in itself. So we talked about that at some point. I think we would have to be sensitive to if people, if they want to identify or how they identify, giving people like options for identify. I think that would be important, but I don't know that we're where we need to be.
That's a good point too, because it's very much a binary, so there's binary thinking in there. And so I just think, this presentation format has been in place for I think 3 or 4 years now. And I think we can do better to get beyond binary.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. LaChance? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 2.04, we have our Kratz Elementary School repair update. And Mr. Lindhorst.
Trying to steal my glasses.
And you won't be able to read your report.
Exactly. Good evening. So I sent about a 2-page memo to Dr. Kilbride, and I know he included it in the materials. I want to go over, highlight some items in that and answer questions. So we have water intrusion at Kratz. This is on the main, on the entrance side of the building towards Edmondson Road. And after they opened up the interior wall to see what was happening, the engineers and architect, their educated opinion was that it was coming over the wall, over the foundation wall, and in between the foundation wall and the structural wall. So, and the main reasons are the drains that are along there are clogged up after doing investigation. Also, the concrete apron that originally sloped away from the building, as you want all of your ground to do, is now, after 67 years, sloped towards the building. So that's no good. Luckily, the intrusion was not that bad. But the wall was opened up. We've now authorized them to close that up because the room needs to be moved, needs to be used, and the cost was not that big. But now we're left with trying to prevent this water intrusion in the future. It's not an emergency, although it could happen at any time, just depending on the amount of precipitation we get. My biggest concern was I didn't want to do anything that we may come back later and redo or mess up when we use Proposition S funds to improve the entrance of Kratz and get the entrance up to the top of the hill where it's more accessible, instead of having, when you come in and having it split level and you have to go up or downstairs. So I've been assured that that's not going to happen. And again, that's also a building that we would be installing a bus canopy at. So this work would not affect that work in the future. So again, we tried to put a camera down there. They tried to then hydro pressure water. The one drain, the one pipe would not go through. So it is possible that it's busted and actually moved and no longer in alignment. The other one couldn't be camera. We couldn't get a camera down at all. 1 out of 3 drains is draining, the other 2 are not. So really, we're at a loss of what is going on beneath the ground. 6 feet beneath the ground, according to the as-built drawings, is where the pipes are. And so we really need to excavate and see what's going on with the pipes. Based on the drawings and the educated guesses, and the worst case scenario, the contractor that has worked for us the last couple of years on several projects and has worked on the Kratz stage and the Marvin stage. That's why we had them open up the wall, interior wall right away. And so we have a not to exceed price from them based on basically the worst case scenario of having to replace all the drains, all the pipes leading down to the north, down the hill basically, to get rid of the stormwater. And that amount is a little over $117,000. Now, again, as we get in there, and if things are better than better than the worst case scenario, it could go down. The not to exceed amount is good because it protects the district. And again, we can't really go out for bids because we don't know what the scope of work is. I personally trust Mark Camp, the owner of this construction, of Wachter Construction, very much. I've worked with him in the past before Ritenour, and now we have worked, and he's done a lot of jobs for Ritenour also. Doug Kuba, the architect, has reviewed the costs. He believes these costs are reasonable, and I have faith in Mark Camp also. So that's where we are. We want to go ahead and let them do the repairs. And again, since it's repairs, I don't believe we need to go out for bid statutorily. And again, because we don't know what the scope is, we don't have to go out for bid. So that's really all I wanted to point out, and I'll just answer any questions you might have.
I'm having questions. I would agree that our team should be fair and honest person and whatever break trust. I've always done good work over the years that I've been.
Board members, this is a recommendation that would be coming to you next week. So Mr. Lindhorst said it's not an emergency, but if the board would approve this next week, what kind of a timeline do you think we might be on for this work?
Well, they could get started. They're ready to rock and roll, right? So if it's awarded on next Thursday, I would say by the next Monday, they would, if not Friday, he would be ready to start digging. It's probably going to take at least a few weeks, at least, but maybe longer. But it'll also depend on what they find when they get in. But that's the other thing. We'd love to get it done before the January 19th. So. And, if we tell Mark that, he'll do his best to get it done.
And this will be no disruption to the current students that are coming to school?
No, what? I'm sorry?
Disruption?
Well, it is along that front area, to the south, to the north and the south of the flagpole and the main entrance. So it just depends on how bad it is. The pipe, of course, does go along through the sidewalk too, underneath the sidewalk. Okay. So it's possible that they may need to use a temporary entrance for about a week if we get it going on the 14th. So maybe a little more than a week, they might have to use that upper entrance instead of the main entrance. Just depends on, but we'd rather do that and get it done by the 19th. For a potential return for phase 2 for all grades. So
yes, okay.
Well, not to exceed cost is a good way to go. You will give us the actuals for your reports once it's done, right?
Yes, and as always, you approve all expenditures.
Just
yes.
Okay. Anybody else?
So board members, there's another project that Dwight is going to speak on a bit. So you're aware that we've received CARES Act money. We received the initial volley of CARES Act money back in April. We received a second amount of CARES Act money that we received new information not too long ago that we have to have those costs encumbered by the 31st of December. So we need to act quickly. So just wanted to have Dwight update you on where we are with that.
Yeah, so the CARES Act comes in many forms. We got ESSER money, which was the 1.3 million, which is the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds. The last one we got at the end of October was CRF, coronavirus relief funds, which are not as flexible as ESSER funds. So these funds we got, and it's about $70 per kid. It was $61.5 million that DESE freed up somehow. I'm not sure how that happened, but and so they chose to just distribute it right away, $70 per student, and nobody was told anything until a couple weeks later, and said, well, you have to have this spent by December 30th. And we said, well, what can we spend it on? Can we do salaries like we did before? No, can't do that. And so they finally had a meeting on November 20th is when we finally got more information. And really the information we got was not very helpful. Neither DESE nor the federal government is providing much guidance on these. It has to be related to COVID and coronavirus, and that's about all they'll say, other than it can't be salaries that would have been spent otherwise, and it can't be anything that was in a budget as of March 13th that was already in our budget. So as we started thinking about what we could use it on, there's several items. We have implemented disinfection teams both during the day using bus drivers that wanted to work more, and disinfecting crews at night. And so we can take the salaries and the payroll taxes and retirement on those and put those against these funds. We have hotspots that we got reimbursed from a different grant, an access grant that we've already claimed, but we bought more hotspots since then. And so we will take those costs and put them towards it. We thought about buying air purifiers for every classroom and probably every office, since we have almost $440,000 to get spent here by December 30th. And I believe, they will be effective in those spaces. And I believe they will also lead to more comfort for students and staff, if only mental comfort, but it will help in the purification of the air in those spaces. The other thing that districts have talked about is ionization, and that is where you add something onto your HVAC systems. It has to be systems that have ducts. So our two-pipe systems in most of our classrooms with a unit ventilator, it is not easy to add this to. But basically what it does is puts electrical charge through the air coming out of the system, and somehow that electrical charge encapsulates germs and bacteria and protects it and allows it to be filtered easier as the HVAC system is running. So we would like to add those to. So for instance, this newer wing of Ritenour High School is all ducted systems, so we could add them relatively easily. We could add them to our classrooms that don't have the old two-pipe system. Early childhood is a complete Daikin system, which is a variable refrigerant volume, which means nothing to anyone I know. But it's one that can be added easily. And some of our older buildings have some classrooms with this system also, and we can add that relatively easily. The other thing we'd like to do is look at large spaces like cafeterias, gyms, libraries maybe, that have the larger rooftop units, and those that are needing to be replaced and we can add ionization to, we could replace those quickly And it'll actually probably help our Proposition S funds go further, because some of those oldest units would have been some of our top priorities that we were going to replace anyway. So we'll tie those to, we'll justify those by doing ionization and more energy efficient and cleaner systems to help the air quality in our larger spaces. And that will be our justification for using the coronavirus relief funds. So those are the items that we're discussing. I'm sorry?
It'll use up all the funding.
I'm really not sure at this point. I don't know what we can get incurred and encumbered by December 30th.
No, that's what I was gonna ask.
Honestly.
Even if we went out and got the stuff.
Correct. We are going to do our best, and
What
we'll
happens if
just,
it's not spent?
huh?
What happens if it's not spent?
Theoretically, they could have us return it. Honestly, I don't believe the federal government is going to make anyone return any of those funds.
Right.
I think they will be as lenient as the federal government ever has. Well, I take that back. ARRA back in 2008, American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, was federal money that I, in my experience, have never seen more flexibility and well, just least oversight that I've ever seen. And I think this is going to be the same thing. Even though they tell us that these funds aren't as flexible as the ESSER funds, I just don't see them asking school districts for it back. I just don't see it. But that is a possibility.
It's probably just to make sure it gets spent as quick as possible for budgeting purposes on the overall budget.
I would agree with you.
It depends on the kind of money that it is that they gave to you, because that's how it works.
Right.
So Dwight, what about the continued maintenance on this, on these pieces? The continued maintenance, and I just want to make sure we're not getting ourselves into something where the future maintenance is going to hinder us.
So I think, we talked about, basically, I think the only thing we're really worried about would be the air purifiers, because those will have filters that need to be replaced. I think we can buy some replacement filters in the beginning. That's about probably as far as we can push it based on what guidance we were given about that it has to be incurred, but can it benefit some future period? It's a little, I wouldn't want to buy more than one replacement filter for each of those purifiers. Let me put it that way. So, and be in compliance. So we can do that. And after that, I think buildings will have to plan on including those replacements in their budget, and or maintenance might have to, we'll have to budget it somehow. It maybe will affect our future budget recapture that we have seen. So we haven't really done a whole lot of investigation on those purifiers. So we'll have to see what those filters run and how often they have to be replaced.
And then I was going to say, what is kind of the lifetime of a
Yeah, I honestly don't know. Do you know that? No. So that is something that we have to get done quickly and ordered.
Okay. I was wondering, Orlando knew any of that. I was wondering if you knew, like, if there was any maintenance, like how long the.
Purifiers, that I'm not sure.
Okay.
We want to have one that, and I was actually going to ask that same question.
Yeah, they're gonna, we'll be looking for ones with HEPA filters, but I don't know how long those last.
Okay.
So just for clarification for me, so we're good on hotspots in our district?
Every once in a while, we have ordered more and more. We've done a 50 more and 50 more. At some point, we should have everybody taken care of. When we need more, we have ordered more through technology. At this point, Fred still has some, Dr. Harlan still has some, when we're getting close to running out, he sends an email to me and Dr. Kilbride and say, okay, well, let's get another 50 or whatever. I mean, the demand was started very high and it has gone down, but especially families moving into the district will have a new family with kids and they don't have connectivity. And so we get them another hotspot. So
There have been times where there has been a waiting list for those hotspots. And so the communication between the district office and buildings has been an opportunity a couple of times around hotspots where, you know, the wellness teams are doing a great job getting out in the community, and they're really on the front line for hotspots where they might do the delivery. I shared information a couple of weeks ago. We had a hotspot that actually caught fire in a house, and it was a wellness team that replaced it. So the opportunity for communication is there are some times where it's been reported we're out of hotspots. And then when that information really gets to Julie Hahn, to Dr. Harlan, to Dwight and I, then there's a new supply that's ordered. So there's been a handful of times where there's been a waiting list for those hotspots.
Do they ever run out? Like, you know, I don't know how it works.
Yeah, so it's really about the size of a deck of cards or about the size of a cell phone. So I'm not really aware a whole lot of them breaking down. Julie, are you aware of many issues that we're having? Yeah, they seem to be okay. There have been issues where they've been damaged and they need to be replaced, but it's usually not like they just fail.
Yeah. Are they checked out and also returned at the end of the year?
So they are being tracked. So we started off with hotspots, and it was actually Dr. LaChance a year ago. We got a grant for 100 hotspots through St. Louis County Library, and so those were checked out through the Ritenour High School library. When we started with the pandemic, there was an initial order of, I think, 200 hotspots. Those ended up going very quickly, and I think so far we've either placed 3 or 4 different orders. And yeah, they're tagged and they're tracked. And I think I shared information with the board. To get those 200 or 250 processed quickly, we had to call in some additional support. We called in some bus drivers that had technology backgrounds. It did great work to make those things ready quickly to get them home.
And I will also say that to relieve some of your concerns, maybe that Julie Hahn, as you might imagine, and social workers, when they're getting low or they're saying they don't have any, we hear about it very quickly, as you might imagine. And Dr. Harlan gets more in as soon as possible.
I was just asking that question, just thinking about this money. I think it's a great idea with the air purifiers and the ionization process. But just thinking about, okay, is there anything that we need to do for the students directly, since we don't have as many in the buildings right now? So that's why I was asking that question. And then just for clarification, like in the memo, I thought it was saying that we were focusing on the high school for this, but I thought I heard you say that we would be looking at potentially all of the classrooms.
Yes.
And all of the large spaces.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the air purifiers, I mean, we won't put them in a cafeteria or a gym. I mean, we'd have to have numerous. So we're talking about every classroom, probably every office, every conference room, every workroom, teacher lounge, whatever you want to call it. So all of those kind of spaces.
Thank you.
We
And
don't
then-
need any more computers or?
No, we have the computers we need. The other stuff that you can actually spend it on is for delivery of students. Well, no, not delivery of students, delivery of meals. Delivery of meals, which of course we've already gotten funding for that. There's several other things that we've already been funded for through the PPE we've already been funded for with the various things that you could use it for, but we've already gotten CARES Act money numerous times. It is literally like ARRA, where money is raining out of the sky sometimes, which is good, but this is one that has a little more requirements for documentation and spending. So we will make use of it.
And so board members, certainly, the amount of support, the financial support especially, that we're receiving to navigate the pandemic, really is just amazing. I think right now, this this is a challenge. I mean, so we're really coming to you with a challenge this afternoon or this evening to get this money spent as quickly as we need to get it spent. I was in a meeting yesterday with the superintendents from the region. DESE is putting out another shipment of masks. And so next week, we're going to receive 12,000 more masks from DESE in adult and child sizes that we'll have available. And so when that shipment of 12,000 masks come, I think we've already received 14,000. We're going to receive another shipment of 12,000. And so that'll be something that we'll be able to push out into buildings so that buildings will have a larger supply for staff and for students when kids come.
They're the throwaway kind.
They're cloth.
Oh, they are?
No, they're the cloth kind. They're very similar to what we've received before. I think it's actually Hanes, I think is the manufacturer.
Mhm.
So it's made out of Hanes fabric. So they'll have them on site at the buildings.
So as Dr. Kilbride said, and what we discussed was it's going to be very difficult to spend this by December 30th. Our plan is to order and spend as much as we can. We will not have time to come to the board for approval each time. So I'm just telling you, our plan is to spend up to $439,790 by December 30th, and we will keep you informed. But absence of any objections, that is the plan, to spend that in less than a month without formal board approval as we go.
And cannot be used on salaries.
Only the salaries that would not have been
Part of the budget.
expended otherwise. So that's why I said we can use it, and it was not in our original budget or in a budget as of March 13th. So we did not have those disinfecting crews hired or even thought about at March 13th. So we will be able to use those salaries and benefits, but that will be a small drop in the bucket.
So is that good news?
So I'm just gonna put this out here. So if there are opportunities where we have, I know that there's a group of students looking at curriculum and trying to create a class surrounding social justice, and are there opportunities to hire staff that could focus on that type of area?
I don't know how we would justify that has to do with COVID.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it has to do with COVID.
Thank
That's
you.
right. I forgot about
So
that.
yes, if we hire temporarily, I would say, since this only has to be spent through December 30th, if we hired, for instance, social workers dealing with the mental, social emotional needs of students related to COVID, or staff even related to COVID, we could charge those. But it has to somehow be related because of COVID. That is the wording, because of COVID.
I don't know if you can get people that quick though.
I don't either. Well, and it doesn't have to be salaries either. It could be a purchase service if we wanted to hire outside, professionals. Actually, I'm surprised that Ms. Hahn has not thought of that yet. Well, she didn't verbalize it to me yet. She's still working on her proposal, I'm sure.
Do you have an organization in mind, Julie?
She is always thinking of how to help students, and a lot of times there's a cost associated with it. I'll say it that way.
Agreed.
That's why we love her.
So Dwight, can you talk about what encumbered means? Like, so what does it mean to encumber something like?
Well, so if we, the actual wording in the guidance is incurred, and they actually would like it paid, but they know that that's unrealistic.
Right.
So incurred, we can encumber, as Dr. Kilbride's saying, by issuing a purchase order, which is a financial obligation that we're saying we will buy these. So as long as we get purchase orders issued by December 30th and paid soon thereafter, we will be fine. I'd say within a couple months, 2 or 3 months.
So, Mr. Lindhorst, I'd like to say thank you very much for going through this and trying to find the best way to spend these funds. I want to make sure that people, whether they be listening or sitting in this room, know that this is not just free money that we're spending willy-nilly. It is money that is going to be thought of and spent to best help our students and our staff. And so I just want to make sure that we're very clear on, we don't have money just being thrown at us, and we have an opportunity to make our buildings better for our students and our staff, whether it be with a support group that is helping our students, or if it's by being able to put air purifiers in a classroom, something that we would have never thought of 9 months ago. So I just want to thank you for that, but I want to make sure people understand that, we don't just have money being thrown at us.
Yes, you're exactly right, and that's a good point. If my presentation lent itself to thinking that we had money to blow away, I apologize.
No, it didn't. I am making that statement for other reasons, and
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So board members, the next item on the work session agenda is there are a couple of policy edits that will be coming to you next week on the consent agenda. And as is our process, just wanted to use the work session to go through those a bit. If you remember, at the last business meeting, we did the first reading of the sexual health policy. There were a couple of really good questions that were asked in between. We did some follow-up with Desi to get some clarification around the flexibility that we have in that policy. And the answer that we got was really there's not a whole lot of flexibility in that sexual health policy. So that will be coming to you for a second reading and approval to you next week. This is separate from that. These are policy edits, and this is in response to a statutory change. So the statutory change, House Bill 604, closed the loop or closed the gap that may have existed around employees and sexual misconduct. Sometimes if there's an allegation of sexual misconduct, it would be possible for a staff member to resign a position and pursue employment in another school district without that school district having any information about the alleged sexual misconduct in their prior district. House Bill 604 closed that gap and indicated that put in new provisions around notification. So there's required notification to the next district if an employee is suspected of sexual misconduct. So where do these policy changes, where do they generally come from? They generally come from either statute changes or they come from lawsuits. So these edits are clearly connected to lawsuits that are stemming from House Bill 604. So as districts became more diligent about notifying the next district around allegations of sexual misconduct, there have been situations where they were just allegations with no basis. So the edit to the policy, the change is in gray. When you're dealing with employee misconduct, there's the matter of employment, and then there's the matter of criminal or the law side. So when it comes to sexual misconduct, we don't deal with the judgment around the criminal matter. We just have to decide, does the employee need to be terminated? And then we cooperate with law enforcement. So the change or the edit to the policy would be, if the employee violated a board policy related to sexual misconduct, the district is required to disclose the information only if it is determined to be an actual violation after a contested case due process hearing is conducted pursuant to board policy. This means that when a violation of board policy is involved and not stated a stated crime or a substantiated claim with Children's Division, the district cannot simply offer a due process hearing prior to disclosing the information, but must actually hold the employee hearing. So what all that means is an employee is suspected, they've resigned their position, we get notification from the next school district and we notify, yes, we believe that there is a substantiated claim from the children's division. This policy edit says that we would actually have to hold a due process hearing before we would confirm that information and share it with the next school district. And so why this is clearly a result of the lawsuits is likely. There's been information shared with the next school district that ended up being proven to be false, and it impacted the employee's ability to gain employment in another school district. So what does that mean for the board, and what does that mean for us? In the random occasion that we would have a staff member that would be accused of sexual misconduct, you know that the employee would be placed on leave while the investigation is being done. We would need to be able to follow through and hold a due process hearing in conjunction with our attorney to the degree necessary to determine what we would be able to share with the next school district. And so again, the why behind this, lawsuits are being filed, information is being shared out of an abundance of caution with the next school district that is impacting an employee's ability to secure their next job. We would have to go through the step of holding a due process hearing, confirming the details here in the district prior to notifying the next school district of exactly what happened. So again, it's kind of the push and pull. Initially, the gap was closed because there were a number of staff members. I'm not speaking specific to Ritenour. This is in general. There's the potential for staff members to try to escape allegations and just get a different job somewhere else. This puts more responsibility on the district to make sure that we're fully investigating claims before we would notify the next school district about the allegations.
So if they put in to resign, we have to do this after they resign, before they resign, what? I'm not
So
following.
the specific language, the district cannot simply offer a due process hearing prior to disclosing the information, but must actually hold the hearing. So if there's an allegation is made, person resigns, we actually have to follow through and hold a due process hearing and follow through the preponderance of the evidence. Like if we get a request from another school district requesting information about the person, there has to be a due process board hearing held to get all the facts out there.
Do we do it only if we hear from another district, or we have to do it before we hear from another district?
So as a part of our process, determining the facts of the situation, but in the situation where sometimes employees will resign to avoid a due process hearing, this closes that gap. An employee would resign, we would still hold a due process hearing before we would share anything with the next school district that's requesting information about the employee.
Then it's assuming that we knew that something was going on.
Right,
If they resign, we don't hear about it until after the fact,
Right.
and they're gone.
Right.
We're not responsible.
right.
Okay.
Right.
So can you only share information with the district if they request it?
So right now, the information that we share with the district there's a form that goes through the HR department. Is the person under suspicion at this point? It's a little kind of a checkbox kind of a deal. If we are prepared to answer yes on that, we have to have held a formal due process hearing to say before we would mark yes.
Likewise, we don't bring anyone to you for approval unless we got an form back from the previous district and state service. Sometimes slow down the process, we don't bring anybody to you for approval unless we got that form completed.
So how does this affect the school districts if they did not? In the same case, what I'm just sharing. So if a school district has not done the due process, they no longer can check the box.
So then it would be, we would not check anything.
No, I'm not
We
talking
have to
about us.
conduct
I'm
a due
talking about coming from another, as you
We
just
hire
shared.
somebody.
Sorry.
Talking about we hire somebody.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So how will we be informed from the other school district that the person is under suspicion, if they can't, check the box, if they did not do the due process.
Yeah, so the prior district would have to either not mark yes or no, which would be a flag for us.
Okay,
Or if they marked yes, they would have also, because this is statutory and because this is something that is high priority from MSBA, other districts, other public schools in the state of Missouri, they have to have the same policy in place so that if they mark a yes there, they would have had to have held a due process hearing. Same thing we would do before they would mark yes.
right, but I think you answered my question with the, if the box is left unmarked.
Yes.
That sends up a red flag.
Yeah, if the box is unmarked, if there's not a no, then that person is not a candidate for the district.
Okay, that's what I was saying.
Am I correct in understanding your comment there that this is Missouri? So if somebody comes from outside or we lose somebody that goes outside Missouri, this would hold true unless their state has the same thing?
So generally, wherever educators come from, we're required to get are they subject or are they suspected? Doesn't matter, that can be outside of Missouri. So like, we have to have that in place. If we have a Ritenour educator that is trying to go elsewhere, then we would have to conduct this due process before we would mark yes that the person is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay.
And then the additional policy edit, the following paragraph will be added under GCPB, the resignation of professional staff members. If a district employee is terminated as a result of an allegation of criminal sexual conduct involving a child or sexual misconduct as defined in board policy or as determined by Children's Division, the district may be legally required to release or may choose to release information regarding the allegation to potential employers as detailed in policy GBLB. These edits are partnered together. They connect with each other, as do all of the references, so all of our policies are cross-referenced. In these circumstances, the district will provide the employee or former employee a due process hearing when required by law if such a hearing was not already provided. The superintendent or designee is authorized to consult with the district's attorney to determine the appropriate level of due process of, if any, to provide. So this edit closes up the gap around terminations. So it's essentially saying much of the same thing. It's just cross-referencing policies.
So then that goes back to the question that Ruth had about, so if it's a former employee and we did not do a due process hearing, then now we're gonna have to do a due process hearing?
So a former employee?
Yeah, so once they've been terminated, and let's say 2 months from now, because when they were terminated, they did not identify that they were going to pursue another teaching opportunity. So 2 months from now, they come back and we didn't do a due process hearing. Are we now going to have to do a due process hearing for them?
So I don't know. I can get clarified. That's a good question. I don't know the answer about that. I'll get Amy Clendenin's take on that and I can get that in the Friday memo tomorrow.
Well, it says in these certain district will provide an employee or former employee due process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's the question around
Yeah.
timeline is what I'm taking
Yeah,
from Lisa's question. So
Okay.
yeah, I don't know.
Could it also mean that a due process has to be done, whether they terminate or resign from the district?
Yeah.
Either way?
It closes the gap for both. The question that I'm sitting with, based on what Lisa has shared, is what's the timeline? So a terminated employee, could it be from 6 years ago?
Yeah.
Right.
Right, so that's, I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to get that.
And so does that mean like our practice is going to have to be here regardless if somebody resigns or terminated due to concerns about sexual misconduct, that we always do a due process?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what it sounds like.
That would be the practice, just to make sure that, not just that, it's not about us being covered, it's about keeping kids safe. But yeah, that would be the practice. When we do have those allegations, it's not as if a due process hearing would be coming up. You can resign your position and that due hearing goes away. The due process hearing has to happen.
I think it's a good thing.
But I will follow up in the Friday memo tomorrow after talking to Amy about Lisa's question around timeline, and is there going to be any kind of, clawback is the term. So is this retroactive if there are staff members in the past that fit these criteria that we need to go back? I'll follow up with those information. With that information, I'll try to answer all the questions before next Thursday.
Can someone forward me the credit number? I feel like I missed those. Or is it on board docs?
They're on board docs.
They're on board docs, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So Jennifer, going back to your question about the RPFI, I've only worked with one RPFI in the district out of Parkway. But I was looking it up and it just talked more about the filters themselves, lasting anywhere between 2 to 5 years. So if the filters last that long, the purifiers must last several years beyond.
That was the filters that last 2 to 5 years?
Yes, from what I'm finding on
But not the unit.
Right, so the units,
Yeah.
I'm assuming if the filters last that long.
Yeah, great.
And they have to be changed out, every two or 3 years. So the
Cool.
units must last quite a while.
That's better than what we thought.
So I haven't found anything on the units themselves.
Well, I think that's a good measure. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Cool. And then
Agenda?
Yeah. So board members, the last item for tonight, I've got the draft of the agenda for next week. So we're scheduled to be in here, 7 p.m. start for our December business meeting. We've got 2 schools of the month, Weiland and Kratz, and both Dr. Greenstein and Dr. Stryker are planning on having a small group come to attend. They're being, very aware of the pandemic, but do think it's important for every school to be represented appropriately. So we'll have 2 schools of the month next week. During the standard set of reports, I'll speak a little bit about some of the pre-filed legislation. So December 1st of every year is the beginning of pre-filed legislation for this year's legislative session that'll be starting up in January. Quite sure again this year, be a number of bills around expansion of charters and virtual charters. There's been a lot of conversation recently around MOCAP. And again, it's that idea of bills that would remove our ability to decide whether or not MOCAP is in the best interest of a child. And instead of us sending the money to the providers after we've run our process, there'll be legislation that would just leave the districts out of it just cut the districts out of it entirely. And if a family would choose MOCAP, DESE would just redirect the funds directly to the providers.
So we would have no input.
Have no input at all, yeah. On a positive note, in the meeting with Dr. Stewart and Miss Adams yesterday, we've had a small number of our families that have been in MOCAP. I think the highest number of students that we've had in MOCAP ever has been 9. We've had a small number that have dropped MOCAP and have come back to written or virtual options. And so I think that will be, as we work to improve our virtual offerings, that'll be a good metric to see as a gauge of quality. How many Ritenour families are opting for MOCAP, how many Ritenour families are opting for Ritenour Virtual Academy when it's a choice option as we get through the pandemic. The hope is, and that was part of the strategy in developing the Ritenour Virtual Academy, not just to give choice to families, but also to be a competitor to MOCAP so that we can have Ritenour teachers teaching Ritenour kids and we can keep that funding here in the district.
We just got thrown into it a lot quicker than we were planning.
Right. So in our reports, in my report, in the superintendent's report, I'll give an update on some of the pre-file legislation that jumps out to me. In the business items, Mike LaChance will be coming back for your approval of the academic calendar for 21-22. The external auditors have been working with the business office. So the external auditors will be coming to you next week with the results of their external audit and asking for your approval of their work. Our annual enrollment and class size report will be coming to you next week. And then I put in a memo, there's been a bit of a change in that St. Anne SRO agreement. If you remember, board members, we've had 2 board meetings around that. After the last board meeting that was held and it was approved, the next morning I signed off and took the agreement to St. Anne. There was some change in policy that was reported that caused some pushback in signing. So worked with the St. Anne Police Department and Chief Jimenez around some new language, and that specifically is around the chokehold restraint. The policy change by their accrediting body, the chief reported that it prevented them from signing off on preventing chokeholds. But working with the game changers, the student feedback was that, and St. Anne agreed, that they would agree to not use the chokehold tactic on any current Ritenour student. Their fear came from the fact of if there's somebody coming from the outside, meaning to do harm to children or staff, they need to be able to use any amount of force necessary to address the threat. So that's different than the language than what you approved before. So if you support the change in the language, it'll be coming to you for your reapproval next Thursday, and then that agreement will be in effect. And so all of those pieces that go along with that, specifically Tabari Coleman and the anti-bias, anti-racism training for the SROs and the police department is being held up until we can get, multiple sign-offs on that agreement. I got the signed agreement from the chief beginning of this week. And so it'll be coming to you next week for your consideration and approval. If you approve, it'll be in effect immediately.
And are we gonna go to the other municipalities on that?
Yeah, so board members, the thinking was we're starting with St. Anne. And then once we get the agreement finalized with St. Anne, then we would move to St. John and, follow through with the same process that we did with St. Anne. And then after that, we would go to Breckenridge Hills and then to Overland. The next item is the second reading and the adoption of the sexual health instruction policy. The first reading was last month. There'll be some personnel recommendations on a personnel list and then board member comments in the open session. On the consent agenda, I'll follow up on the question around the policy edits that we just shared. I'll do that tomorrow. And if you have any other questions after seeing the Friday memo tomorrow, please feel free to reach out before the edits would come to you next Thursday. There'll be a program eval from Michael Smith around safety and security. This is something that's always been of high interest to the board. It'll be uploaded in board docs tomorrow for your review, and it'll be coming to you on consent next week. And then we'll have a number of closed session items for you next week, board members. I'll put in the Friday memo. They're all going to be personnel related, and I'll get the details out to you tomorrow. And that's the agenda for next week.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything? All right.